Good morning. I hope that everyone's having a good day so far, and I appreciate everyone's time for sitting in on this webinar today. If you've attended any of our other webinars in the past, you may notice that we are not the usual presenters. My name is Caitlin McLaughlin, and I'm here with my colleague Laura Schultz to co-host this webinar on communication strategies for wastewater compliance and building public trust. Both Laura and I work as science writers for the wateroperator.org program, along with our sister sites, privatewellclass.org and decentralizedwastewater.org. And though neither of us has directly worked in communications for a wastewater treatment facility, we spend all of our time scouring the internet for valuable resources to share with you all. During this presentation, we'll introduce wateroperator.org and provide an overview of how it serves as a valuable resource for water and wastewater professionals nationwide. We'll also explore specific documents and resources that can be found on our website to help your utility build public trust through communication. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. So before we get started, I want to quickly go over some housekeeping stuff. So this webinar will be presented on the GoToWebinar platform. For those that have not used GoToWebinar before, you should see a console similar to what is shown on this slide. There is a question section that you can use throughout this presentation. If you press the icon of the text bubble with a question mark, you should be able to submit questions throughout the webinar. Your question will either be answered by our moderator or held until the end for our question and answer section. Any questions that we cannot answer today can be emailed to us at info@wateroperator.org, and our team will be happy to help you out. This webinar will also be recorded and uploaded to our wateroperator.org YouTube channel after it's over. And I also wanted to mention that we have submitted this webinar to both Illinois and Indiana for continuing education credit hours, and we are currently awaiting approval. But for those of you from other states, we will be more than happy to offer you a certificate of attendance or help you complete any forms required by your certification body to help you receive credits for this webinar today. I do believe that the webinar registration form asked whether you would be requiring a certificate, but if you're interested and didn't indicate so during registration, please send us an email at info@wateroperator.org requesting a certificate of attendance with the name of this webinar. Include something like communications for wastewater compliance in the email text so that we know which certificate to issue to you. Additionally, we will not be able to provide any certificates for watching the recording of this webinar once it has been published. Since we will be referencing a lot of links throughout this webinar, please don't hesitate to send us an email if you would like a copy of the slides. So this will be the outline for today's presentation. We'll start off by introducing you to what kind of website wateroperator.org is and outline the types of resources and information that operators can find through the tools that our website offers to further your knowledge on water and wastewater management and communications. Our team has given similar presentations to this one in the past, but we always focus on a different area of wastewater compliance. Today, our focus is on building communication strategies that wastewater utilities can use to support compliance and build public trust. We will explore common communication challenges faced by utilities and learn about publicly available resources for improving your communication, notification, and engagement with the public. We'll begin with a quick review of NPDES public notification requirements and common communication practices and challenges faced by wastewater utilities. Things like public access to NPDES permit data, public notification requirements related to sewer overflows, rules and guidelines for biosolids land application, and much more. These are situations that many wastewater systems will face when it comes to communication with the public, so it's important to ensure that operators and staff know where to look when faced with common challenges. Then we'll highlight some publicly available tools and resources that are designed to guide operators through various communication challenges and public notification requirements. And then we will walk you through how to locate similar resources on wateroperator.org so that you can explore what other types of communications-focused resources are out there for wastewater utilities. We'll then wrap up by introducing other features of our site like newsletters, blog posts focused on wastewater compliance, and our free self-paced classes that offer CEUs. By the end of this session, you will know what kinds of communications-focused compliance tools and resources are readily available to wastewater operators. So, what is wateroperator.org? It's a website which we developed at the University of Illinois in collaboration with the Rural Community Assistance Partnership, or RCAP, With funding from US EPA, it serves as a clearinghouse of publicly available resources to help water and wastewater system operators with a focus on small systems. We have a team that scours the internet to find and collect various publicly available information and resources that are useful to operators and provide a means to search and access that information easier through our website. So rather than having to sift through pages of search results on Google, we made a platform to search for relevant resources easier so that you can save some time. Also, you might find a useful resource through a Google search, but then find out that it's behind a paywall or requires a membership on that particular website in order to access the resource. A lot of resources from bigger organizations like AWWA or WEF are like this. So everything you can find on our website is publicly available information, and there is no fee or registration required to use our website. Additionally, if operators have trouble finding certain information, they can always call us or email us, and we will try to help them find specific information that they're looking for, or try to connect them with people with more technical knowledge that can help them out. So how do we find these resources and what do we look for? We have a database of over 800 organizations, such as national organizations like EPA, AWWA, and WEF, as well as individual state agencies, regional associations, and even vendors. Each of our staff members visits these organizations' websites and looks for information on events like operator trainings, webinars, conferences, and pretty much any event which offers continuing education credits for operators. Even if they don't offer credits, if an event is free and useful for operators like many EPA webinars, we will also collect that information. We also look for publicly available resources like fact sheets, reports, manuals, past conference presentations, pretty much any kind of technical resource that can be helpful for operators, and especially focusing on, again, small system operators. We have been searching and collecting these resources since 2009 and currently have collected over 15,000 documents, and we catalog over 11,000 events every year. Our website was actually first called smallwatersupply.org, but we rebranded to wateroperator.org around 2016. The website was originally developed for operators in rural communities where they may not have had the time to search for technical resources, since in many rural communities, the operator running their facility may not be a full-time operator and can sometimes have a different full-time job. Additionally, back then, there was still a lack of infrastructure providing high-speed internet to many rural areas, so we wanted to reduce the need for operators to have to download resources with large file sizes by providing a place to search for water and wastewater specific resources. We include short summaries so that operators can easily decide whether downloading that specific resource is even worth their time. So after we collect all of this data, we display that information via the calendar and library tools on our website. Our nationwide calendar tool is meant to help operators save time from having to search through numerous organizations' websites and find all the relevant events on one single calendar. Similarly, we collect the most useful publicly available resources and display them on our document library. Both the calendar and the library utilize an extensive search functionality so that you can easily find the information that you're looking for. We will show screenshots of these along with examples later in our presentation today. So for each entry, we also make sure to provide a complete summary with the most important details. For example, we will make sure to provide a short summary of the document as well as information on where that document was found. And for events, we make sure to give you a summary of the event as well as complete information on cost, CEUs offered, and contact information to the training provider, including a few other things depending on what each event is featuring. We always make sure to include a link to the host organization's website as well as credit to them. And we try not to host any resources ourselves unless they are resources from organizations that are no longer active but still useful today. And we always make sure to connect users to the host organization's website. In the past, we've heard from many operators that have found the nationwide calendar to be an excellent tool to help find events that they never knew existed. We've even gotten calls and emails from operators saying, hey, I need to get X number of credit hours by the end of the month. Can you help me find some online courses that I can take from my office? And we've guided them through our calendar to help them find what options they may have had. We've even had various vendors reach out to us asking to have their events featured on our website. And many times they don't seek pre-approval. So we always tell them, if you can get your events pre-approved, we will list them on our calendar. And some vendors have actually gone through the time and effort to get their trainings pre-approved just so they can be listed on our website. So we do try to make sure that all the information we display is valuable and practical for operators. Now, as mentioned earlier, we deal with a wide range of topics, and every resource that we add is tagged with specific categories, which then gets integrated into our search engine. On this slide, we have a list of the categories or filters that we use to sort the trainings and events that we catalog. This is just to give you an idea of what other kinds of topics you can search for on our website. The graphic here breaks down the categories covered by roughly 12,000 training events that we added in 2024. As you can see, we include a significant number of events related to operations and maintenance, water treatment, wastewater treatment, and operator certification. I also wanted to take this time on this slide to mention that there are a lot of free training opportunities and resources from organizations like the Environmental Finance Center Network that are informative and often communications focused that I recommend you keep an eye out for. And we will also feature some of these resources later in our presentation. So, during this presentation, we will be highlighting a variety of publicly available resources designed to assist wastewater utilities with improving public communication, notification, and engagement. These materials focus on proactive, hands-on approaches, such as developing communication plans, building public trust through community engagement, improving customer outreach, preparing for incident and emergency notifications, communicating about regulatory requirements and compliance, and using effective messaging tools to reach diverse audiences. We will also review a mix of resource types, including guides, webinar recordings, podcast episodes, best practice manuals, checklist templates, and much more. We will also look at how to search for communications and public notification focused training opportunities that offer CEUs, which can help operators maintain their licenses while staying current on best practices. All of these materials come from trusted and credible organizations. Many of the resources that you'll see were developed by EPA, which oversees the NPDES permitting programs. And additional resources included have come from state agencies or educational organizations like EFCN.
Okay, hi everyone. This is Laura now. I'll be taking over for this next section of the webinar. So the reason we're talking about communication today is it's not a skill where it's necessarily very easy to find advanced training in the specific realm of wastewater utility operations. Large municipalities may be easily able to bring in someone trained in communications and PR, but a small rural utility will often have to handle situations that require communication with the public with their existing utility management. As our wastewater infrastructure generally grows older and demand on the systems increase, the potential for situations requiring effective public communication also grows. We can see on this slide a sample of news stories covering situations where an effective communications plan is essential in order to be transparent with the public. Sewer rate increases, sewage spills, and construction for new wastewater infrastructure. In all of these cases, the public will want to know why the situation is happening, how it will cost them financially, how it might impact their health and safety, and if the situation is being effectively managed. Not having answers for these questions opens the utility up to losing public trust. The goal of this presentation is to first offer a refresh on public notice requirements in various situations and to show that there are training resources and guidance out there to help learn basic communication strategies for municipal wastewater. While I imagine that most everyone in attendance today knows what a public notice requirement is, I'm going to take a moment to define the term just to be thorough. For any kind of public utility, a public notice requirement is a legal rule that compels that utility to inform the public as well as their local governments before the utility changes rates, shuts off service, or begins major construction work. The public needs to know why these things are happening, how it will impact them, how long it will last, and how they can communicate with the utility for further questions. Water and wastewater utilities must also give notices and additional contexts. Situations where public health and safety are put at risk are perhaps the most obvious one, such as drinking water contamination or sewage spill incidents, especially if sewage might come into contact with the public. When a discharge of raw sewage and/or chemicals from a wastewater treatment plant poses a risk to pollute water bodies, there are requirements for public notice that are regulated by state environmental agencies through the authority of the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or NPDES program. Another increasingly common situation for wastewater utilities to give public notice is the case of land application of biosolids. We'll briefly summarize public notice requirements for NPDES permits, sewage spill incidents, and biosolids land application before we get to discussing communication strategy today. The primary pieces of federal legislation that regulate public notice requirements for water or wastewater facilities are the Safe Drinking Water Act and the Clean Water Act. The Safe Drinking Water Act generally cannot compel a wastewater utility to need to issue any kind of public notice as it regulates drinking water systems. So just a few quick facts about SDWA's public notice requirements for comparison's sake. A public drinking water system must give public notice under the SDWA when there have been violations of drinking water standards, treatment requirements, or monitoring requirements, or in the event of emergency. The health risk posed by the violation or emergency dictates how fast the notice must come out. There are 3 tiers of notice. Tier 1, requiring immediate notice within 24 hours, so think boil water orders. Tier 2, requiring notice within 30 days. That's situations where health impacts are possible, but not guaranteed. And Tier 3, requiring notice within a year. That would be minor violations around monitoring and reporting. And a state's primary agency may impose additional public notification requirements than the federal ones mandated in SDWA, but they cannot be less stringent. The kinds of federally mandated public notice requirements wastewater operators generally need to be concerned with instead originate under the Clean Water Act through the NPDES program that originated under the CWA in 1972. As such, the public notice requirements directly under the CWA more closely constitute a framework. This framework incorporates public notices themselves, required public comment and hearing opportunities, and information access requirements. There are several points in the NPDES permit issuance process that public notice is required and a window of time provided for public comments and public hearings. Even when a permit is issued, utility facilities with NPDES permits need to continue to submit monitoring and compliance reports that the public may access in state or US EPA databases. So again, public notice regarding NPDES permits is required when a permit is issued, modified, or renewed. Once the application for the permit is submitted by a treatment facility, the permitting authority of the state becomes responsible for providing the public notices. The permitting authority is either the state's environmental agency or the US EPA itself. As the permit process moves along, a new notice is required at these times. When the draft permit has been prepared, if the permit application is tentatively denied, when a public hearing is scheduled, and when certain new source determinations are made. There are a number of ways the permitting authority can disseminate the public notice. Commonly, they are sent through mail or electronic distribution to relevant parties, published in local media, shared on government websites, and the EPA online public notice portal. The link to the EPA's public notice search portal is included at the bottom of this slide. As of July 26th, there are currently 18 public notices available under the NPDES program on the portal. Once a notice has been issued, at least 30 days for public comment is required, and if there is enough interest, a public hearing is held. There's another minimum of 30 days notice required before the hearing. A public comment period upon the notice of a new or updated draft permit is always required. However, a public hearing is not. When a hearing does take place, that hearing is a formal opportunity for the public to voice their input on a proposed permit and to influence the permitting authority's decision. Here's the basic version of the public hearing process. As already explained, a draft permit is issued and at least 30 days for public comment is opened. Then a public hearing is scheduled. The permitting authority can choose to hold one regardless of the level of interest received in public comments, but significant public interest will also trigger a hearing. Another 30 days of notice before the hearing is provided. At the hearing, interested parties present comments and testimony. This would be members of the public, the permit applicant, local government, environmental groups, businesses, or any other stakeholders. Then, the permitting authority logs the comments and testimony in a public record. The authority will review and respond to significant comments. Examples of significant comments include technical challenges to the permit, water quality concerns, questions over legal or regulatory standing, identification of errors or inconsistencies, and more. Finally, the permit decision is issued. After evaluating the record, the authority will issue, modify, or deny the permit, and they must provide an explanation for their decision. So transparency with the public regarding discharges regulated by NPDES extends beyond the permit process and public notices. An essential part of maintaining public trust in local public and environmental health is the public accessibility of data and information pertaining to ongoing NPDES permits. This public access means that stakeholders can follow whether a facility is complying with permit limits, track for themselves trends in water quality, be cognizant of any recurring violations of permit compliance, and to participate effectively in any future public comment and hearing processes. Aside from the public notice issuances and other documents pertaining to proposed permits, generally speaking, the required accessible information falls under the categories of compliance and monitoring reports and effluent data. Such reports specifically include discharge monitoring reports, or DMRs, inspection reports, compliance evaluations, violation determinations, and enforcement actions and settlements. Components of the effluent data that should be publicly disclosed include pollutant concentrations, pollutant loadings, and flow measurements. The EPA's Enforcement and Compliance History Online, or ECHO, public portal collects national NPDES compliance and monitoring history. You can see the search tool and the URL to the portal on this slide. Many states also maintain their own separate state-specific databases and dashboards to track compliance and maintain public access to these records. Individual utilities are not required to self-publish any of this information as long as it does not concern a sewage overflow event that poses health risks to the public. Instead, utilities provide the necessary reports and information to their state's permitting authority, who assumes the responsibility to make the information publicly available. So now we'll briefly discuss standard guidance for notifying the public when a sanitary sewer overflow, or SSO, occurs. This type of sewage spill does not have public notification requirements that are mandated federally by the Clean Water Act or any other national legislation. That said, the NPDES program is still involved. When an SSO takes place, your state's NPDES permitting authority should be notified as soon as possible within the next 24 hours. After the initial event, follow-up reports for specific types of overflows, bypasses, or other non-compliance events will also need to be submitted to the permitting authority. You will need also to maintain records concerning the overflow that will become publicly accessible in the database where your NPDES permit information is stored, ECHO in your state's database. While a press release or other public notification is not mandated by the CWA for any specific SSO, instead these requirements will be found through any of the following: your state's environmental regulations, the conditions of your individual NPDES permit, an administrative order, or from your local health department. The methods of disseminating notice on an SSO might include posting public signage, issuing a press release, updating your website, coordinating with your health department, and more. Practically speaking, the general process today for utilities is that when an SSO impacts a surface water body, public property, or another drinking water source, there will be some sort of local authority that requires the utility to provide some form of public notification in order to protect public health. In Illinois, for example, the NPDES portion of SSO reporting requires that the Illinois EPA be notified within 24 hours and that they receive a full written report within 5 days. There is not a statewide legal requirement on public notice, and most commonly the requirements for public notice are detailed in an individual NPDES permit. So combined sewer overflows, or CSOs, are subject to more stringent direct federal control than a sanitary sewer overflow is. The CSO control policy, implemented in 1994, emphasizes the importance of keeping the public informed of CSO impacts and having them involved in the development of long-term control plans, but it does not establish specific enforceable national requirements on public notification. Instead, detailed requirements on public notification are established through individual CSO permit conditions or state regulations. What these permit conditions are likely to include will sound familiar from what we have already talked about regarding the NPDES permit process and SSO notice practice. These common requirements are for combined sewer systems to report to their permitting authority when a CSO occurs, maintaining records of overflow frequency, duration, and volume, discharge and monitoring reports, and public access to CSO information and data. However, there is one big difference in federal public notification requirements over CSOs. There actually is a federal policy with very specific requirements for public notification for CSOs discharged into the Great Lakes Basin. A new rule was added to the Clean Water Act in 2018 to create these requirements. We'll talk more about them on the next slide. These public notice requirements for CSOs in the Great Lake Basins were established by the EPA through the instruction of Congress due to the need to protect the Great Lakes as a drinking water source for tens of millions of people in North America. Here's a basic outline of the requirements established by this rule. First, warning signage must be posted at CSO outfall sites and any impacted public access locations. These signs must include the sewer authority or municipality, the nature of the discharge, contact information, and NPDES permit information. Local and/or state health departments and other affected governmental entities must be notified of the CSO discharge no later than 4 hours after the permittee becomes aware of it. The other entities include drinking water utilities, parks departments, and municipalities and/or tribal governments that may be impacted by the overflow. When it comes to the public themselves, the timeline is extended to no later than 24 hours after becoming aware of the overflow for public notification. Acceptable methods for public notification commonly include website postings, social media, text messages, press releases, and more. When the overflow event is done and more complete data is available to the permittee, they must share additional supplemental information, including the overflow's location, dates and times, estimated volume, and impacts to drinking and/or recreational waters. Each year, a summary of CSO discharges must be issued to the public. And finally, the specific mechanics of all of the above, from how notifications will be issued to how health department coordination will be handled, must be established ahead of time in a written public notification plan by each NPDES CSO permittee. So, there are also no federal requirements on issuing public notice about the land application of biosolids. However, due to increasing concern over PFAS generally and as a component of biosolids, the practice is receiving renewed attention, and several states have strengthened their oversight, monitoring, and other controls on land application. Maine has banned the application of certain biosolids entirely. So other states can fall into one or more categories when it comes to the level of notification required over land application. There's minimal notification, where the permitting, reporting, and compliance regulation comprises the majority of the publicly available information. Neighbors may receive little or no advance warning unless a permit requires it. Minnesota is an example of this. Then there is permit process notification, where public involvement is required during the land application permitting process. The public comment and hearing process is structured similarly to the NPDES permit process we've talked about. Here, Indiana is an example. Then there's direct neighbor notification. Some states do explicitly require that neighboring landowners receive direct notice when a land application is proposed or planned. Here, Pennsylvania is an example. And then there's states where local government gets involved. Some states allow more local levels of government to impose their own additional requirements that are more stringent than the states. California is an example where a local authority may impose restrictions or controls on biosolid use in their jurisdiction. As the public continues to expect further transparency regarding biosolids and PFAS, other practices that can be implemented would be GIS maps of application sites, posting monitoring results online, disclosing PFAS sampling, and enhancing community outreach. Because we're expecting for this webinar to count for continuing education credit in Illinois and Indiana, here's a quick blow-by-blow on how public notification requirements of these categories differ in these states. In Illinois, NPDES permit process requirements are basically the same as federal requirements. However, there are some additional requirements on how notices are circulated locally. We've talked already about the SSO requirements. For CSOs, the combined sewer systems in the Chicago metro area, the discharge into the Great Lakes Basin, of which there are about 42, are subject to the federal requirements. The Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Chicago also practices enhanced notification measures, but since that's not a small system, we won't get into those today. In terms of biosolid land application, Illinois requires public notice during the permit process, and therefore public comment and hearing opportunities are required. But direct notice for individual application events is generally not mandated. And then in Indiana, again, the NPDES permit process requirements are basically the same as federal, but there are also some minor procedural differences and requirements. For SSOs, the event must be reported to the Indiana Department of Environmental Management within 24 hours and an incident report submitted. CSOs in Indiana discharging into the Great Lakes are also subject to federal requirements. However, Indiana also has its own statute requiring additional CSO public notification rules. Here are some of these differences. CSO communities must also inform people who have specifically requested notification, as well as downstream drinking water suppliers with surface water intakes within 10 river miles. Notification must occur when the discharge is occurring or when it's imminent. Annual public Public outreach on CSO notification takes place each March to let the public know that they can request individual notification of CSO events. And there are additional signage posting requirements at a wider variety of public locations. For biosolids, as already mentioned, notice in the permit process is required. Direct neighbor notification is required in some application cases, but not all. So, while we have not analyzed all 50 states' regulatory requirements for public notification on each of these areas, we have a few more special cases to highlight. We encourage you to make sure you're aware and up to date on all statewide public notification rules that you are subject to in your state. For a state with more requirements in place for the standard NPDES permit process, we can look to California as a prominent example. In California, a discharger must publish the public notice of the draft permit in the largest circulation newspaper in the area and provide proof to the state water board that they did so. The water board will also always hold a hearing after the initial 30-day notice period. Minnesota and Washington State also generally put more time and outreach energy into their draft permit notification practice. In New York, we have one of the best examples of a state going above and beyond on CSO public notification. The state's Sewage Pollution Right to Know Act mandates that utilities must report CSO discharge to the state within 2 hours of discovery and to the public electronically within 4. These notifications must include the info on location, timing, duration, volume, and treatment status. Massachusetts also has an act promoting awareness of sewage and public waters, which puts in place formal CSO notification plans and practices. Finally, for biosolids, let's look back to Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection requires that each landowner adjacent to an application site receive at least 30 days notice before biosolids are first applied to a site. There's even a specific process to follow for this and compliance forms to ensure that the process took place. The applier must also directly inform the DEP and the local county conservation district, after which the DEP evaluates the site. If they find it suitable, the DEP will notify the local municipality as well as the state Pennsylvania Bulletin. Virginia also requires more extensive public informational meeting practices during the biosolids application process and adjacent resident notification by mail. All right, so communication is a vast field of practice. There's much more to developing strong and effective communications plans than we are able to cover today, but we'll do our best to cover the basics. To start, here's 7 principles for communication for any public utility. 1. Be transparent. In any communication you have with the public or anyone else, be honest, be unambiguous in your wording, and be comprehensive in the details you share. This is the cornerstone of building public trust. Number 2, put customers first. Make sure you use language that the average member of the public will understand. Whatever it is you're communicating about, make sure that you explain what impact it will have on who you're talking to. Make sure they know how to follow up with you with further questions. 3, whenever possible, communicate ahead of a service disruption, construction project, change in rates, expected CSO outfall, etc., with plenty of time in advance. Share project timelines and be clear about what to expect if an emergency strikes the utility. 4, make sure that all platforms or methods of communication that you use have consistent messaging. From your website and social media to in-person conversations to printed materials and beyond, be sure no messages contradict each other. 5, when emergency does strike, to the best of your ability, send out notices ASAP, provide regular updates, focus on public safety, and anything the public can do to protect themselves. 6, customers and residents you serve should be your top priority, but you should maintain strong relationships with all stakeholders you interact with. Adjust how you communicate with government, media, your employees, and etc. as necessary. And 7, measure your impact. Anything you can quantify to assess your effectiveness, do it. From online engagement to public meeting participation to surveys or anything else, do your best to build on what's working and tinker with what isn't. Any type of utilities communication to the public is very important, but in the realm of wastewater, effective communication is especially essential because the average community member does not know much about wastewater systems. At the same time, the behavior of the public can directly impact system performance, public health, and environmental quality. Drawing on many of the resources for wastewater and utility communication that we'll be highlighting to you later in this presentation, here's a preview of the guidance these resources will offer. Focus on what people care about. They don't care about the technical aspects of the treatment system, but they do care about clean water, keeping their families healthy, reliability and affordability of service, and community well-being. Connect your communications to these issues. Make complex issues visual. Again, most people won't understand the science or engineering of your wastewater treatment system. Generally, they will understand visual information better than written or oral communications alone. When possible, use photos, maps, diagrams, infographics, and etc. to explain and reinforce your communications. And then frame investments as community benefits. Most community members won't want to pay more for or be inconvenienced by wastewater service, infrastructure improvements, or compliance measures. But if you can clearly explain why doing so protects their health, preserves quality of life, and may be less costly in the long run, they'll be more likely to support spending and/or major construction. Also, know your target audience. You need to understand the people, person, or organizations who are trying to specifically reach. Start any communication project by identifying your target audience, outlining their likely concerns and values, motivations, and tailor your approach accordingly. You may even want to go as far as to sketch out fictional personas of those audiences. Listen as much as you talk. Communication is a two-way street. You must also listen and consider all the responses you receive. Whenever possible, seek public input, acknowledge concerns, ask questions in return, and show that the information you hear back from your community is considered in utility decision making. And then, create ongoing relationships. While specific communications projects and efforts might be seen through the lens of a one-time campaign, in order to build trust for the long term, it's better to look at communication as an effort to build ongoing relationships. The simple fact is that successful utility communication is continuous. Aim for consistent messages delivered via repeated engagement with the necessary stakeholders. So, as for building media relations, the best practices for communicating with the media in some ways aren't all that different than those for communicating with the general public, but they will be used in a different context and setting and possibly applied differently. It's important to have strong media relations because the media is also communicating and telling stories about your utility. We want the public to be getting good information from them too. So here's some quick hit advice for building your media relationships. 1. Have the relationship in place before you need it in the event of a crisis or PR issue. Maintain a media contact list, contact reporters periodically, and establish the utility as a trusted source. 2. Be partners with the media. The media can be key in helping to explain wastewater issues to the public, so you don't want to be enemies or adversaries with them. Build a partnership by providing reliable information about water quality, public health, and infrastructure. 3. Be available to reporters. Take and return their calls promptly. Don't make them wait for info. Do what you can to make it easy for them to gather facts and context. 4. Don't explain things in a technical manner. Many reporters won't understand it any better than the public. Avoid jargon, use clear language, and use easy-to-understand examples. Then, if you're getting interviewed, prepare the key messages you want to communicate ahead of time. Think about the who, what, where, when, why, and how of your messaging. 6. Frame the stories you tell around public health, environmental protection, service reliability, and other benefits to the community. Remember, these are the things that most people care about the most. And 7. In the event of an emergency, choose one person to coordinate with and speak to the media. Be honest and transparent with them about what happened and what the utility is experiencing, and make sure you're the first source of information they get. Don't let there be an information vacuum or for rumors to spread. Finally, social media. It may not be everyone's favorite thing, but it can be a really crucial tool in building public trust, improving transparency, and maintaining regular communication with your community and stakeholders. Maybe you've got a young person on staff who has this handled already, but here's some tips for anyone still trying to figure it out. 1. Choose the right platforms to post on. Figure out which ones your community uses most and will get the most eyes on your messaging. Facebook, Instagram, and Nextdoor are good bets these days. 2. Post consistently, not only if there's some kind of emergency or special update. See if you can establish a set schedule to share operational updates, water quality information, and news on ongoing projects. Keep your messages simple and use visuals when possible. This nearly always applies in all communications contexts. Then, share behind-the-scenes content. Get people more interested in the goings-on of a wastewater utility by sharing staff spotlights, facility activities, or other day-in-the-lifestyle content to humanize the job. And respond back to comments, answer questions, and acknowledge feedback you receive. Remember, communication is a two-way street. Finally, track your metrics and make improvements where you can. You can use many platforms' built-in tools to view post engagement, follower growth, and other metrics. Focus on what performs well and adjust what doesn't. So in short, don't use social media merely as a broadcasting tool. Use it as another relationship building tool and an educational source.
While many of the resources that we will be featuring in today's webinar will be documents related to public notification requirements, we also wanted to feature some resources with general communication strategies that can be employed in a wide range of scenarios. So the resources that we feature in today's webinar can be broken down into these 5 themes. The first one being building trust and transparency. So these will be resources focused on transparency, credibility, risk communication, and maintaining trust before, during, and after incidents. The next one is public notification and regulatory communication related resources. So all of these will focus on communicating compliance issues, permitting, public notices, and regulatory requirements. The next one is community engagement and public participation. So these resources will be focused on two-way communication, getting the public involved, stakeholder engagement, and building relationships. The next one is communication tools and official channels. So these resources will be focused on social media strategy and digital outreach, as well as communications with elected officials and decision makers. And then the final theme group we have here is knowing your audience and crafting messages. So these will focus on understanding your audience, developing personas, framing messages, and creating communications campaigns. Okay, so let's get into the first few resources. So this first group of resources are all centered around the importance of building trust and being transparent with the public. These documents, again, will focus on credibility, risk communication, and maintaining trust. These first 2 guides are from the American Water Works Association, or AWWA, and both are made specifically for water and wastewater utilities to learn more about communication with the public. The first resource is an 88-page risk communication guide that provides practical strategies for water and wastewater utilities and explains how public trust, social media, misinformation, and community concerns can influence the perception of the public. Wastewater professionals can use this guide's recommendations to help them develop proactive communications programs, find ways to engage stakeholders, and position their organization as a trusted source of information. It also offers some ready-to-use tools for responding to public concerns, including templates, social media best practices, crisis response checklists, case studies from utilities, and message frameworks that can help you to address community questions and communicate with empathy during challenging situations. The other guide I've featured here from AWWA offers a proven framework for community-centered utility communications. So this one offers practical tools for reaching underserved and diverse audiences. It emphasizes using plain language messaging, a culturally relevant outreach, perhaps having a multilingual communications options for your community, and creating partnerships. It also includes some case studies and community engagement best practices to help show how strong communication can help support project success and trust. If you're someone who listens to podcasts, then you may enjoy this 2-part episode from our podcast, Hap Talk, all about building trust with the public before a crisis or issue occurs. In it, our hosts, Jennifer and Steve, interview founder and president of the water utility communications and PR firm Water PIO, Mike McGill. While the focus of the conversation is about the shifting landscape of communicating in the water sector, they mostly discuss drinking water related issues. The principles and strategies included can be applied for wastewater communication topics as well. The conversation with McGill emphasizes proactive trust building and community engagement long before any crisis may occur. And this is done through ongoing outreach and communication efforts that help build public confidence and support effective crisis response in the long run. In it, they discuss strategies for communication planning and developing messages. They talk about how utilities can create tailored communication plans, prepare for a variety of scenarios, and address complex public concerns. which can help wastewater professionals to communicate compliance efforts more effectively. They also highlight the importance of maintaining up-to-date communication channels. So like your utility website and public information resources like social media, so that you can establish credibility and make information readily available to the public when they're looking for it. And then they also address modern communication challenges like misinformation and reputation management. And we provide some strategies for responding to misinformation and maintaining credibility so that you can manage your perception within the public. There we go. And then these are our final two resources relating to building trust and transparency with the public. This first one is actually another podcast, and this is from EFCN, and it's a 19-minute long episode that's all about the importance of communicating about wastewater. It highlights the importance of understanding and engaging stakeholders and shows wastewater professionals how to identify audiences, tailor their messages, and maintain meaningful communication over time. It contains some practical lessons from communication and outreach experts and demonstrates how community-specific outreach strategies can help improve public awareness and understanding of wastewater services, which just helps utility staff to communicate more effectively with stakeholders. Another great resource to help build trust and promote transparency with the public is EPA's online ECHO database that Laura discussed earlier in this webinar. ECHO provides public access to environmental compliance and enforcement information for regulated facilities nationwide, and it allows users to search facilities, review histories of compliance, and examine violations, which helps to make it a valuable transparency tool for wastewater utilities. Since it provides an easy way for wastewater operators to check the compliance information that's publicly available about their facilities, they can anticipate questions from customers, elected officials, and the media regarding permit compliance and enforcement history, and also use this as a reference when developing public notices or stakeholder communications. You can refer back to this publicly available information. Okay, so we have now moved away from the trust and transparency focused resources and are now going to look at some resources on public notification and regulatory communication. These resources are focused on communicating compliance issues, permitting, public notices, and regulatory requirements. The two featured on this slide are specifically about NPDES permitting. The first one being a 4-page fact sheet from EPA that explains how the public can participate in the NPDES permitting process. It provides a step-by-step overview of permit applications, public notice periods, comment opportunities, hearings, permit decisions, and appeals, which helps wastewater professionals to better understand when and how to engage stakeholders throughout the permitting lifecycle. By explaining how residents can access all of this information, this fact sheet helps you as the wastewater professional to develop communication strategies that will promote accountability and strengthen community confidence in your utility as a whole. This guide outlines the requirements for public notification and gives you valuable insight into how to communicate that permit-related information clearly. The other resource on this slide is a 1-hour webinar recording from EFCN that is not directly communications focused, but it provides clear explanations of key wastewater permit parameters, such as flow, pH, dissolved oxygen, BOD, TSS, nutrients, and bacteria. Webinars with basic information breakdowns like this one can help utility staff translate technical compliance requirements into language that the general public can understand. It offers useful talking points that can be used for public education and outreach materials, including why wastewater treatment protects local rivers and streams, how treated wastewater is returned to the environment, and why proper sewer use, for example, avoiding flushing wipes, medications, or other non-flushable items, is important for system performance and environmental protection. Even though this webinar was not created with wastewater communications in mind, I still think that this resource is valuable for a communications campaign so that you can explain the purpose of NPDES permits and the value of monitoring and reporting in a way that makes sense to community members and stakeholders. These next two resources are specifically related to biosolids and land application notification requirements in the states of Pennsylvania and Virginia. Reporting requirements vary widely from state to state, as we mentioned earlier in this presentation. So please be sure to research whether your state has similar guidance on biosolids. The two-page fact sheet from the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection explains biosolids in clear, plain language for the public, which can be used by wastewater professionals to help address common misconceptions by clarifying that biosolids are treated materials, not raw sewage, and describing how they are produced and used. This document provides a model for proactive public notification and outlines Pennsylvania's specific requirement to notify adjacent landowners before biosolids land application activities begin. It also highlights regulatory safeguards and oversight, including treatment standards, site restrictions, permitting requirements, which can give communicators some credible information to share when responding to potential public concerns about biosolids land application. The next resource is from the Virginia Biosolids Council, and it explains regulatory public notification requirements for biosolids permitting in Virginia. This includes public meetings, comment periods, newspaper notices, and stakeholder outreach requirements. This document demonstrates multiple communication channels that can be used to engage the public, such as mailed notifications, public hearings, published notices, and local government notifications. This highlights the importance of proactive communication and transparency with the public. It shows how input from the general public and your surrounding community can influence permit conditions and operational decisions, which really reinforces the value of early community engagement in building your trust. Now, this slide is focusing on documents related to combined sewer overflow, or CSO, public notification requirements. These checklists that I have highlighted here are specific to the Great Lakes Basin, and we talked about them a little bit earlier in this presentation. But these two documents can give utilities in other areas a good template to use when developing a CSO public notification plan of your own. So even if these requirements are not there for your state, these are still a really great template for how to come up with your own checklist. Both checklists cover similar ground, but the first one on this slide, called Developing a CSO Public Notification Plan Checklist, explains how to build and manage a complete notification program, whereas the second on the slide, the Public Notification Elements Checklist, focuses on what specific notification components and procedures your program must contain. So again, the first one, it's a 3-page checklist that provides the framework for developing your public notification plan, and it can help utilities to meet EPA requirements and help ensure compliance. And it also outlines communication strategies to help keep your community informed about CSO events and potential public health risks. The second one, the 4-page checklist, provides the template to help you develop your notification program to meet EPA requirements, but it also establishes procedures for communicating about overflow events and potential public health risks through signage, electronic notifications, and outreach to the affected community members. Both documents promote timely, transparent communication with communities, health departments, local governments, and tribal entities to help strengthen compliance and public understanding of CSO impacts. We are now going to look at some community engagement and public participation related resources. These resources will focus on two-way communication, public involvement, stakeholder engagement, and relationship building. The first one being a blog post from EFCN that provides strategies for building public support for wastewater projects. Its purpose is to help utilities communicate the need for system upgrades, regulatory compliance efforts, and long-term investments in a way that will resonate with community members. This demonstrates the value of early and ongoing stakeholder engagement and how being proactive in your communication can help to reduce opposition, address concerns, and build trust before major projects or public notifications are issued. Next up, we have this 17-page guide by Junction Coalition and Water Hub with input from Rogue Water Lab, which serves as a roadmap for effective utility community engagement. The guide provides actionable recommendations for creating open communication channels, gathering public input, and strengthening relationships with customers. It offers real-world case studies on managing complex water and wastewater issues, including examples from communities across the US that demonstrate how utilities have successfully navigated public concerns related to infrastructure investments, water quality challenges, environmental incidents, and rate increases, which provides some lessons that you can apply in your own communities. The last resource on this slide is another blog post from EFCN that introduces proven communication and public participation strategies for environmental management initiatives. This can help wastewater professionals engage the public in discussions about water quality, wastewater infrastructure, and environmental protection. The blog post explores techniques for identifying and engaging diverse audiences so you can tailor your outreach and notification efforts to the needs, interests, and concerns of different people in your community. It also demonstrates how stakeholder participation can improve project outcomes, help to reduce conflict, and increase public understanding of wastewater issues, which all of those can end up strengthening your long-term relationship between your utility and then the community that you serve. All right, another useful resource that discusses the importance of building relationships and engaging with the community is this webpage from Water Environment Federation, or WEF, with a roadmap for public health monitoring implementation. There is a section specifically about building relationships on this webpage, and it highlights the importance of establishing lasting relationships between your utility and the surrounding community. The section discusses how relationship building is a foundational element of successful public communication efforts and emphasizes the importance of partnerships among utilities, public health agencies, elected officials, community leaders, and the public. This resource offers actionable strategies for stakeholder engagement, including recommendations for connecting with health departments, how to convene a kickoff meeting for your program, maintaining regular communication, and involving community leaders early in any program development. This resource helps to equip wastewater professionals with ready-to-use outreach resources like infographics, bill stuffers, educational materials, and public health contact information that can be adapted for newsletters, social media, community meetings, and public notification campaigns. I've also included this blog post from EFCN called From Septic to Sewer, 5 Communication Strategies from Communities That Made the Switch. And this contains proven communication strategies for infrastructure projects by highlighting the real-world examples from communities that successfully transitioned from septic to public sewer service. This demonstrates how effective outreach can really help to build public understanding and support. The case studies featured here help to emphasize the importance of explaining the why behind projects, which helps wastewater professionals to connect system upgrades that may be necessary to water quality protection, public health benefits, environmental stewardship, and community quality of life, all things that your community members may care about a little bit more than something that they don't understand. It also offers practical guidance for communicating costs and financial impacts, including recommendations for using plain language so that your community members understand what it is you're actually attempting, how to create a FAQ, different visual tools, and transparent cost breakdowns so that you can reduce confusion and misinformation amongst the public. It also demonstrates how using visuals like maps and side-by-side comparisons can improve public understanding of project timelines, responsibilities, service changes, and long-term costs associated with any wastewater infrastructure improvements. These next couple of slides contain resources focused on social media strategy and digital outreach, as well as communications with elected officials and decision makers. I first wanted to share this great two-part blog post from EFCN focused on social media, since that is a key tool for communicating with stakeholders and community members. Social media is a part of everyday life for many of us, and it has become a valuable tool for organizations to update the public on new regulations, guidance, issues, and time-sensitive information. Part 1 of the blog post provides a framework for establishing an effective utility social media presence. This will help wastewater professionals to identify the platforms that are most likely to reach residents in their area when you need to share public notices, service updates, and community information. It supports consistent and reliable communication practices with the public and recommends some posting schedules and content planning strategies that could help your utility maintain trust and public awareness over time. This resource also demonstrates how you can communicate technical information in plain language. That's something we've been reiterating a lot. It helps people to understand when you're using plain language. And it also encourages the use of visuals and simplifying your message. It would help your utility to improve the effectiveness of their public notifications and help to increase engagement when it comes to important operational updates. This document also promotes transparency and misinformation prevention, which shows how timely, accurate, and consistent social media communication can help to strengthen trust from the public during both your routine day-to-day operations and in emergency situations. Part 2 of this blog post demonstrates strategies for strengthening community engagement through social media by encouraging utilities to share behind the scenes content, highlight staff contributions that may have happened, and showcase local successes to build stronger relationships with your stakeholders. Again, this emphasizes the importance of two-way communication with the public and provides some guidance on how to respond to comments, answer direct messages, and acknowledge community feedback. It also provides a framework for emergency communication preparedness with recommendations on the development of rapid response protocols, message templates, partner agency contacts, and streamlined approval processes for public notifications during any service disruptions or other incidents. This also highlights the value of monitoring public engagement and concerns via social media. This can really help wastewater professionals to evaluate which messages are resonating the most with their audience and help to identify any sort of frequently asked questions that may require additional outreach. This slide features a three-part blog post series from Environmental Finance Center Network. As I mentioned in the introduction, EFCN has many valuable resources, events, and blog posts related to wastewater communications. And we've featured a select few in this presentation, but I really recommend you explore the other communications resources that they have to offer. Now, for this particular blog series, it is meant to help build board understanding and support for compliance initiatives. The tips that are included throughout these blog posts can be applied in a variety of situations and are helpful for anyone who wants to feel more comfortable speaking to decision makers. It's always helpful to have board members and elected officials in your corner who understand the ins and outs of water and wastewater regulations. Part 1 of the series explains the roles that board members hold, their priorities, and different communication preferences to help you build stronger relationships with these decision makers. It provides strategies for translating technical issues into clear, actionable messages for boards. And it also demonstrates how informed board members can help you to support transparency, public outreach, and community trust. Part 2 focuses on board meeting preparations and offers practical guidance for planning and delivering effective presentations on operational, financial, or regulatory topics. This blog post will help utility staff to anticipate the questions they may get, help them to understand board priorities, and be able to tailor messages better for the decision makers that you will be presenting in front of. And it also provides some techniques for clearly communicating compliance requirements, infrastructure needs, and utility challenges while building board support. The third part of this blog post series explains how to present those recommendations and solutions that support informed board decision-making on wastewater issues. So this part of the blog post series will provide strategies for communicating benefits, risks, costs, and trade-offs in a clear, objective way. Finally, this slide contains several resources that help wastewater professionals to have a better understanding of their audience and exactly who these communication efforts are aimed at. All three of these resources are from EFCN and focus on understanding audiences, framing messages, and creating communication campaigns. We only included one slide for resources within this group, the Knowing Your Audience group, since this can go a little bit more in depth into communications campaigns, and it's not something that every operator is going to have time to explore. But for anyone who has an interest in improving their communication strategies, or if you do happen to have a communications person on staff at your utility, these resources are extremely educational. This first one is a 51-minute webinar that introduces the concept of audience persona development as a strategic communication tool. It teaches wastewater professionals how to identify, understand, and segment different audiences so that messages can be tailored to the specific concerns, values, and motivations of different individual residents, ratepayers, elected officials, and various other community stakeholders. It also demonstrates how to create more effective wastewater messaging by connecting technical issues to personal concerns like family health, quality of life, and financial impacts, which can help you to communicate in ways that resonate with your target audience a little bit better. It also uses some real-world wastewater and environmental case studies, which involve sewer system overflows, septic system management, flushable wipes, pet waste pollution, and infrastructure improvements to show how targeted communication can help to increase public understanding, support, and compliance. The next one on this slide is a 48-minute webinar recording, and this one provides a step-by-step approach to building your communications campaign. This can help utilities move from audience research and persona development, which the previous resource focused on, to creating targeted outreach strategies that encourage public understanding and action. So this one will highlight techniques for motivating behavior change, which offers practical examples on how utilities can encourage actions such as proper disposal of wipes and fats, oils, and grease or fog, how to promote septic system maintenance, water conservation, and just general support for infrastructure investments. This webinar kind of shows how to translate these complex topics into clear, accessible public messaging, again, making it easier for utilities to explain the public health risks and environmental impacts that may be important to the public. And then the last one here is a blog post from EFCN, and it demonstrates why understanding your audience is essential for effective communication within the wastewater sector. This blog post helps utilities to identify the unique concerns and motivations that your customers may have so that your messages can resonate and drive engagement. It highlights strategies for encouraging participation from the public, including improving audience research, stakeholder engagement, and persona development, which helps wastewater professionals to create that targeted outreach and increase the effectiveness of your education and outreach efforts. So with that, those were all of the resources that I wanted to highlight today. We will now move on back to Laura for the demo portion of this webinar to show you how you can search for similar resources on your own.
Okay, so this demo portion will be the final section of our webinar today. And again, our website URL is wateroperator.org, and this is what the homepage of the website looks like. There's no login or sign-in required. You can just get on the website and access all of the tools that the website offers for free with no account. What I'm going to do now is show you a demo of the resource library or documents library tool. To access that page, you will want to look at the resource library menu on the top. If you hover your cursor over that menu option, you will get a submenu pop-up as shown on the next slide. So within the submenu, you will see a search for documents option. If you go ahead and click on that, it will take you to the resource library tool page. And this is what that page looks like. There's also a direct link to this page on the bottom of this slide. So once you get to this page, you should see this gray colored search module. There are three components to the search module that you can interact with. The first is the drop-down menu on the left, which says Select. This is where you can choose the main filters used to search for resources. There's also a keyword filter text box on the right, where you can search for terms that aren't covered within the provided filters. And finally, there's the Retrieve Documents button in the bottom, which once pressed will actually run the search after the search criteria is entered. If you've just typed in a keyword to search for, you can also just hit Enter on your keyboard. If you select the Select drop-down option, you will see four filters that you can choose from. once you select a specific filter, a new list will show up directly under the drop-down menu with subfilters. So the first filter is category, which are the 30 plus water and wastewater related categories, which we showed you on the pie chart earlier. Once you select category as the filter, a new dropdown with the 30 plus categories will be available where users can select a specific category or topic. The second filter is type, which can be used to search for specific types of resources. So if you only want to see fact sheets or manuals, you'll be able to select the appropriate filter to only see those resource types. The third filter is the state filter. If you want to search for state-focused resources like case studies from specific states or resources on state regulations, you can utilize this filter. And then the last filter option is host, which is the organization that has developed or is hosting the resource. Once you select host, you will be able to choose from a list of organizations we've cataloged resources from. Once filter is selected, you can click on Retrieve Documents to populate the library. So let's say we want to search for resources on utility communication. What we're going to do first is use the category filter and select utility management as the filter. As something of a behind the scenes hint, many resources on communication are sorted into this category as it is generally a function of utilities management. You can also try consumer information, which covers information utilities may need or want to distribute to their consumers, or public notification, which will cover emergency comms, public notices, and that type of thing. But we're using utility management as a more general catch-all category and because it suits our needs for this demo slightly better. So the first thing to do is select the category option under the Select drop-down menu. You will see a new drop-down list with a list of water and wastewater focused topics as shown in the screenshot. If you scroll down through the list, you will eventually find utility management as an option near the bottom. Once you do, you can then click on that category, which will highlight the selection to show you that it has been selected. Then if you click on Retrieve Documents, the results will show up directly under the search module. And as you can see in the screenshot, the search results have been populated. Right below the Retrieve Documents button, you'll see how many search results were found. And in this example, it says just under 3,000 search results. That's way too many to go through manually. So if we look back at the search module, we now have access to a second drop-down option where we can select an additional filter. So in this case, let's say since we know that the Environmental Finance Center network has a lot of good resources on communicating with the public, we want to just pull up everything from them. In that case, we'll add host as the second filter and select EFCN from the list to only show their resources. Once EFCN is selected and Retrieve Documents is pressed again, we can see that we have reduced the results down to just 60. And to reduce any potential confusion, there are 4 organizations that will show up that start with Environmental Finance Center, as you can see if you look closely at the screenshot. The first 3 are different regional branches of the national network. To make sure we get the main EFCN, we need to click on the final of these 4 options, which we should be able to see says Environmental Finance Center Network and not Environmental Finance Center at any of these regional headquarters. So you might not mind scrolling through 60 resources as opposed to 3,000, but from here, we can also add one more additional filter using the drop-down menu. So let's say that we're looking for those blog posts covering different communication topics on EFCN. We'll add that third filter, resource type, and select webpage/website list. And if we run the search again, we can see that we are now down to just 12 results, most of which are some of the EFCN blog posts we've discussed already. Another resource type filter that is especially useful is video, which could be used to find the webinar recordings we have mentioned, as well as the podcast, which we've sorted under video as the closest match among our available options. Searching podcast in the keyword filter box would probably be the most effective way to find podcasts, though. That said, if we now go through the search results after the 3 filters we applied, we'll come across the blog post Improving Wastewater Communications Through Understanding Your Target Audience. And if we look closer, each search result includes a title of the resource, which is embedded with a clickable link to access the resource, a summary of the resource which outlines why or how the resource is helpful for operators, or any other useful information that makes that resource unique or informative. We hope that these summaries can help you find the resource with the info you're looking for. We also include a link to the repository or the page on the host organization's website where we found the resource. This is so that if you find a specific resource you like and want to find additional information on similar topics, you'll be able to go to the repository page, or hopefully there are other similar resources featured. If this is a resource you want to read, you can click on the title and it will open the resource in a separate pop-up window, which will take you to the host organization's website where the resource is stored. In this case, because the blog post is simply stored on a web page, we're at EFCN's regular website, but if the resource is a PDF that is saved in the website's document archive, you'll also be taken to that archive link where you can view the PDF in full. If the resource is a video, the video will load in the pop-up on YouTube or other video player website. If you prefer to have the resource open in a regular tab rather than a pop-up window, we find the simplest way to do that is just to copy the URL from the pop-up window and paste it into a new tab. We do need to note that sometimes links can go dead when websites are updated or perhaps resources are intentionally taken down. So if you come across a dead link through our search and you're really interested in that resource, please reach out to us through email and we can try to help you find a copy of it or to find a similar resource. So we also mentioned that we have a nationwide events calendar tool, which operators can use to search for training opportunities offering CEUs. So we'll also quickly demo this tool. So once again, this is our homepage. You can access the calendar page by selecting the event calendar option on the menu on the top, as highlighted in the red box on this slide. Once you get to the event calendar page, you will see a search module similar to the document library tool, but with an empty calendar below it instead. On the left side of the search tool, you will see a drop-down option, which will include the 4 filters, similar to the resource library tool. There's also a keyword text box on the right side for searching with unique terms. You can populate the calendar by selecting any of the appropriate filters. We have category, which again is the water and wastewater related topics, type, which are the event types such as trainings, webinars, or conferences, state, which is the state the event takes place in or where training credits are approved in, and sponsor, which is the organization sponsoring the event. In general, we find that most operators we hear from just use the state filter since their priority is finding events approved within their states or events happening close to them. However, the topic of communication is not one that we often find covered in state-specific events. So today, we're actually going to start with the category filter to more effectively navigate to an upcoming event focusing on this subject. But please remember that if you come to the calendar looking for trainings for CEUs in your specific state, that state is often the best filter to start with. So now for this example, we're again going to start with the category filter and go with utility management. Once we select utility management from the category subfilters list, the calendar will automatically populate with events. So this is how the calendar looks populated. You might notice that some events have full names while some entries only have minimum text. Some event names can be rather long. Event names are shortened to just the acronym of the organization if there are multiple event records listed for a single date. If you hover your cursor over an acronym, the full event name will pop up. The screenshot is currently only showing the results in the month of August, but you can switch between different months by clicking on the next and previous month options located on the sides of the calendar module. And of course, if you ran the search on the website right now, it would first show you July 2026. But we want to show you mainly upcoming events. So now let's say you're an operator looking specifically for a webinar or other online training that you won't need to travel for. You can now add a second filter, type, and choose webinar/live online to narrow our search. Generally speaking, this is another good option for your first filter if you're just looking for online learning opportunities and aren't limiting yourself strictly to opportunities in your state. But now that there are less results, we're starting to see more of the event names. We can see one that fits the subject of our webinar today, again from EFCN. That's connecting with your community, bridging the gap between operations and communication on August 6th. We'll also highlight, if you look on the right side of the search module, you will see there is a view list option that will show all the upcoming events in a single window without the calendar layout. In the screenshot, we can see what the list view pop-up looks like. Additionally, in list view, you will be able to see the full event names for all events, as well as the city and venue location if it's an in-person event. If it's a virtual event, it will say live online next to the city. In the screenshot, we have the blue arrow pointing at that EFCN event. So if you want to learn more about this, you click on the name through the list view or the calendar view, and you'll see a pop-up with full information about the event, like this. So, as you can tell, this new window includes all the pertinent information about this event. It shows the dates and times at the top. The event info link will take you to the organizer's webpage where you can get more information and/or register. The details include information about the event, such as what topics are covered and what operators will learn. In this case, it will cover communication with community members, basic communication techniques, and how to strengthen your communication strategy. In this case, we can see the drinking water is mentioned specifically and not wastewater, implying that this event will focus more in the drinking water area. While we've shown you that there are resources out there that cover wastewater communication specifically, we'd still encourage you to consider attending this webinar too. Principles of utility communication techniques and strategies should still be useful, even if you have to adapt them somewhat to focus on wastewater. Contact details are available as well if you have questions that need to be directed toward the event organizers. With EFCN specifically, you need to use a contact form on the event page in order to send an email. Most other events will have a direct email address and/or a phone number you can use instead. And at the very bottom, you can see if there is a fee for registering and any information about CEUs. In this case, the event is free, as are all EFCN events. As for CEUs, when EFCN puts out state-specific trainings, they often have CEU credit available for that state or have at least applied for it and are anticipating approval to come. However, this is a nationally focused webinar, so they do not apply for CEU credit with all 50 states in advance. They can offer you a certificate of attendance, so you may be able to use that to acquire credit in your state. Finally, to show you what it looks like to search for online training specifically, we can see that you can select type first and then selecting webinar/live online from the event type list. Just to refine what's available, we've also added the NPDES keyword just to switch things up some. It looks like there are a few training opportunities coming up in August that are live online and will touch on NPDES related topics. One from the Florida chapter of AWWA, another from the California-Nevada chapter, two from the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, and one from the Washington Environmental Training Center. So that concludes the demos for the calendar and resource library tool. If you have any trouble finding certain resources or certain training events, feel free to reach out to us and we'll be more than happy to assist you. Now, to finish this presentation off, I want to briefly go over some of the additional resources we offer. If you hover over the resource library menu on our website, next to document search, you can find Browse the blog. If you click on it, it will take you to our blog page where we highlight recent news or we focus on a single topic and showcase resources related to that topic. In the right screenshot in this slide, I have one of our older posts highlighting how to maintain customer satisfaction. On the left is our most recent post covering RCAP's rural investments and impact. So we also have 3 newsletters that we send out monthly or bi-weekly electronically through this program. The first is our most popular standard water operator bi-weekly newsletter, which highlights recent news in the water sector, as well as funding opportunities, upcoming free events, as well as some of the resources found on our library. We also have the Innovations for Small Systems newsletter, which is our monthly newsletter where we highlight recent news on innovations in water and wastewater management, but they focus on small systems, as well as recent publications such as research papers or journals. And finally, our third newsletter is our Tribal Utility News, which is geared more towards operators and tribal communities. All 3 newsletters cover both drinking water and municipal wastewater topics. You can get to our newsletter page through the top menu bar, where you can sign up for any of the newsletters or check out archives of recent editions. This is another way to stay updated with industry news, as well as find featured training events and publications. Lastly, we also want to touch on the self-paced classes that we offer. Our groundwater and well care class is our most popular class. It's free, online, and self-paced, and can help operators better understand how to maintain and take care of their groundwater wells. This is the only training we offer, which has been pre-approved to provide training hours for operators in around 33 states, including Illinois and Indiana. We have 3 additional self-paced on-demand trainings available. However, 2 of them are tailored specifically for operators in Massachusetts, as we developed them for the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection in collaboration with UMass Amherst. These 2 trainings cover source water protection and basic drinking water math. Our last course on basic cybersecurity for water and wastewater systems was also initially developed in conjunction with our Massachusetts partners. The Massachusetts version of this course, as well as the source water and basic math courses, are all pre-approved for TCHs in the Commonwealth. But due to demand, we have also produced a general, non-state specific version of the cybersecurity course that anyone can take. It features 19 lessons and requires about an hour of your time. All of these classes can be found at the URL on the slide here. That's classes.wateroperator.org/collections. Again, they're all free and entirely self-paced. That concludes our presentation. If you use wateroperator.org, and run into any questions or issues, please feel free to contact us, Water Operator General Program, or our supervisors, Hideyuki Terashima and Steve Wilson. Our emails and phone numbers are shown here. You can also scroll to the bottom of our website, where you can find program contact information. If you would like a copy of this presentation so you can easily access the resources mentioned today, we'll be more than happy to send you a copy if you send us an email. So at this time, we'd like to answer any questions if there are any. Jennifer?
There are no questions at this time, but we can allow folks a few moments to see if they have any.
Sure, sounds good.
We have one comment come in so far related to CEUs. So I will be processing the certificates this afternoon for anyone who was in attendance. You must have attended 90% or greater of the 90-minute presentation in order to receive that certificate. Yeah, and as they said at the beginning, we have requested a pre-approval in both Illinois and Indiana. So yeah, we have not yet received approval for Indiana. However, they have approved these types of webinars for us in the past.
Okay, so we can stick around maybe another moment or so if another question comes through. But thank you everyone for your time, and we hope everyone has a nice day.
I did see some claps and thumbs up come in as well. So great presentation. If you do have a question, you can use the question box to submit that for us. All right, I think our participants are good today.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Yep. Thanks everyone for your time.